teachers. Do not do that. It is something that always leads to faulty reasoning by everybody. This happens all the time where people will, this happens all the time online. This is how people operate on their online education, is they will have 14, 15 people that they look online to teach them things. And when one person says something they don't like, they say, well, he's wrong about this, but he's right about this. If you ever meet somebody and they start talking about church and you go, oh, what church do you go to? And they're like, well, I kind of like how the Baptists talk about this, and I like how the Pentecostals talk about this, and I like how the Catholics talk about this, and the Methodists talk about this, and what are they doing? They are picking everything they like and getting rid of everything they don't like. But part of serving God is dealing with the things you don't like that are true. Right? And so here he says, don't have a bunch of masters, because what will happen is you'll receive the greater condemnation, because you'll have avoided all of the requirements that anybody will put on you and just enjoyed all the privileges. And so with that understanding, he goes into verse 2. Somebody read verse 2. Okay, now he's talked about different qualities within people, and he kind of builds to this point when he says, in many things we offend. Now, the offense is very important to understand who is being offended. And the who being offended in this case is God. He's not talking about, yes, we offend people. There is no way to avoid offending people. Somebody will be offended by everything. This is how offending people works. He's saying, but there is a reality that we all come short of the glory of God, and so we offend God in all things, very often. And then he builds up to this moment of understanding the ultimate level of not offending, right? Which is, here in verse 2, and he says, if any man offend not in word, the same is a perfect man. And he's able also to bridle the whole body, right? He says if you're able to not offend God in the things you say, then you are a perfect person, and you can control everything else that you are doing, which we all know, right? We can control all the things we do except for what we say. And when we say that, we even mean, right, the face speaks 1,000 words. There are times things happen and you don't control the face, or you don't control your verbal reaction, or you don't control. We were at the restaurant the other day, and if you guys don't know, Sunday the wind was kicking. Sunday the wind was kicking, and at the restaurant we were at, the wind was kicking directly at the door. And so people kept coming in and out of the restaurant, and every time they walked out of the restaurant, the door came in with all of the behemoth ability it could, and slammed every single time. And at one point, our waitress was standing there, and somebody walked out, and the door slammed, and she looked over with a disgusting look on her face, and then came back, and she goes, oh, did I do that where everybody could see it? I said, yes, ma'am, you did it out loud. But the point is what? Controlling your reaction or your verbal input or the things you say is nearly impossible to always do right. And so he's saying that if a man does not offend God at all in the words that he says, that is a perfect man. The man who never has a missed word is a perfect man, 100%. And he says he's able also to bridle the rest of his body so that his body doesn't sin either. And he goes in here in verses 3 and 4. And somebody read the 2 verses. Okay, so he's saying he uses this example of putting a bit in a horse's mouth, right, which is that little metal bar that goes inside of the horse's mouth, and then you put the harness on, and you have the reins connected to either side of the bit, and if you pull the bit a little bit to the side, the horse goes that way. Now, this is an important thing to realize because horses are massive. If you don't realize how big a horse is, you just kind of stand next to a horse as it's moving, and you go, this is terrifying. This thing is huge, it's strong, it's powerful, but just that little tiny metal bit inside of its mouth We turn its head to the right, it goes right. We turn its head to the left, he goes left. Just that little tiny thing controls the entire animal. And then he goes on with these ships. Imagine that massive sailing vessel with this crazy big huge mast, and it's being pulled by winds, and it's really just being torn apart by the wind and being pushed on its side and does all this. And then there's the governor, right, which is the guy running the helm. And he has this wheel in front of him, and he spins the wheel. But what you don't realize is that the wheel isn't even doing anything. The wheel is just turning this little tiny flap in the back of the boat that just goes left and right and turns the entire ship. And his point is that these very small things can control these very huge things. And he's getting to a point, and his point is in verse 5. Somebody read it. Okay, so here he uses the tongue. The tongue is the human version of the bit. It's the human version of the helm. It's the human version of the thing that controls the rest of us. He says the tongue is so little. It's a little member, and it seems to be the most insignificant of all our body parts, and yet it is the thing that can do the most damage. It boasteth great things. And I don't think that was a missed word. I think he intentionally used the word boast, right? Isn't this how people boast? They use their mouth, and all the time they're boasting about nothing. They tell you, oh, I did this when I was 12, and you go, all right, bud. And I did when I was younger, when I was 5, when I was whatever. They tell you about the IQ test they took when they were 6. You go, yeah, but what are you doing with your life right now? What are you doing today? He says this is how they do it. They use their little tongue, and they boast great things. He says, how great a matter a little fire kindleth. And it's almost making an allusion to a house fire. A house fire starts with what? A little tiny thing, a little tiny candle, or whatever. And then it falls over and it lights something, and the whole house is aflame. Your couch is burning, your bed's burning because of just a little tiny fire. And he goes into verse 6. Somebody read verse 6. Okay, he says he uses the tongue to be, he says, a world of iniquity, right? He mentions it's a fire. He says it's a world of iniquity, and then he compares it literally to how the bit controls the rest of the body. He says our tongue is where our iniquity begins, and we all should know at this point, iniquity is doing a sin that you know is a sin. There was no accident about it. There was no, I forgot that I shouldn't say that, or I forgot that I shouldn't. No, it's a known thing. And so because of the tongue being a world of iniquity, a thing that we use to sin all the time, and he's not exclusively talking about profanity here. He's talking about everything we can use the tongue for, whether it be gossiping, whether it be lying, whether it just be contradicting God, whatever we use the tongue for. He says, but by doing it with our mouth, we turn our whole body in the direction of sin, and then we entice ourselves to do more sins because we started with the tongue. This is why you have to be very, very, very careful when it comes to lying. Lying is the gateway sin. 100%. Because what happens is people tell this little lie, and then they end up eventually telling a lie to cover up the lie. And then they tell a lie to cover up the lie that covered up the lie, and they keep building lie upon lie until at some point they might as well do more sin. They might as well do something else because they've already built up so much sin on the lie that other sins seem less daunting because they've got so much sin in this area. And so it's this little thing that can control our members or our body, the whole entire body. He says, which setteth on fire the course of nature, meaning it starts burning our very nature, how we operate, so far that it sets it on fire of hell. Keeps going, keeps going. And he explains the difficulty of the tongue in verses 7 and 8. Somebody read it. he uses this example of all these animals, right? We have horses that we put bits in their mouths and we pull them about. We figured out how to take wolves and tame them and tame them and tame them, and now we have dudes out in the woods shooting ducks and sending their dog to go grab it. I mean, we can control them. We got dolphins playing volleyball. Right? I mean, we can control everything, and yet we can't control the thing that comes out of our mouth. He says, we can control every animal, but the tongue can no man tame. It's an unruly evil full of deadly poison. And then he uses the contradiction here in verse 9. Somebody read it. With the same tongue, we bless God, we honor God, we exalt God, and at the same time, we just wreck men left and right in every sense of the word. Right? And so, this is a crazy thing to do when men are made after the image of God. We're called to love all men. God loves all men. God is this leading force that we're supposed to be following. He loves everybody. We say we love God, and yet we hate men. Any man. Any man. This is a contradiction. A Christian cannot claim, well, they can claim to love God and not love man, and therefore it is just an empty claim. They're just using the tongue, and maybe that's their first sin, is saying they love God when they don't. Because you can't love God and hate man. He says we can't do that. He goes out in verse 10. Somebody read it. Out of the same mouth proceedeth blessing and cursing. Again, I've said it before. Will be said till the day I die. It'll probably be one of the few things that I've said till the day I die. It is hilarious whenever somebody says, "Oh, I forgot you were here." Or, "Oh, I forgot I shouldn't say that here." Or, I need to be careful around you." I don't think people realize the greatest sin in all of life is not to sin in front of the pastor. It's to sin in front of God. I am not the judge, right? And so that's why sometimes people say, "Oh, I try to clean up my language around you." And it doesn't matter, man. You're not even blessing God. At no point were any of us under the impression that you were a Christian. So I don't particularly care. I'm never offended when a sinner sins. I'm not God. I don't expect sinners to do anything other than sin. But when Christians come along, quote unquote, and say that they come to church and, "Oh, God's moving in my life and God's blessing me and God's doing this," and blankety blank blank, you go, "Whoa, how are you doing both? You're going to bless and curse out of the same mouth?" As James says, right? One not to waste words. These things ought not to be. And they ask the question, verses 11 and 12. Somebody read them. Okay, so he asks a question. He goes, "Do you go to a fountain?" And you can imagine going to any spring anywhere in all of America, whether it's the one of the beautiful springs up in the Northwest, or it's the spring up there on the mountain. What is it? Cottonwood Springs, I think it is. Do I have it right? Does anybody know? All right, anyway, the one up there by Mundy's Gap. All right, there's a spring, quote unquote, big quotes on that. All right, you go up there and you see it, and there's just like a tree. You know, "Oh, I guess this is the spring." You have two choices. You can drink that water, if you found any, or you cannot. And most of us would probably make the assumption, "I should not drink that water. It has come through a lot of dirt to get here." But the point is, at other springs, people go and they drink it all the time. And the question is, would you drink that water and take a cup of it and take a glass and go, "Oh, this is delicious," and then take another cup and drink it and go, "This is gross"? No, it's going to be one or the other. It's either going to be good or it's going to be disgusting. And then he goes on, he says, by that same understanding, that same way of operating, he says, "Can the fig tree, my brethren, bear olive berries?" If you don't know, olives also grow on a tree. This is an important detail, okay? they look similar. Olive trees and fig trees do look similar. And you know how you determine if it's a fig tree or an olive tree? You look at the fruit on it, and if it has figs on it, it's a fig tree. If it has olives on it, it's an olive tree. And you would not expect to get figs off of it one week and the next week come back and get olives. It does one or the other. It doesn't do both, right? And so therefore, it should do one thing, right? And he says, so can no fountain, now he's not asking a question anymore. He's making a statement. So, now, can no fountain both yield salt water and fresh? You do not have fresh and salt water in the same place. It is either fresh water or it is salt water. It can't do both because it's the same water. So, with that understanding, verse 13, somebody go ahead and read it. Okay, he says, so who is wise? With understanding all of this, that the Christian, right, which is all talking about the tongue, will produce one thing. The Christian will produce one thing. If a wise person has wisdom, then they will produce out of a good conversation, a manner of life, they'll show you out of that good way of living his works, the evidence of his Christianness with meekness and wisdom, because all these things come together. A Christian has all of these abilities because that is what salvation is. He will bridle the tongue. He will do all of these things. His conversation, his manner of life will be Christian-like. His language will be Christ-like. His good works will be Christ-like. He will be meek. He will be wise. He will be all of these things. He says this should just be the evidence. But verse 14 is the rub. As Shakespeare would say, there's the rub. Somebody read verse 14. He says, this is what a Christian is. But if that does not define you or does not describe you, then don't act like you have the glory of God in you, and don't lie against your own self, right? He says lying against the truth, which is, what is the truth? If this does not define you, you're going to hell. Don't lie and say you're on your way to heaven. You benefit nobody, least of all you. Right? He says, do not glory in some sort of false salvation. Don't glory in some sort of lie against the truth. Why don't you just correct the thing? If you have this bitter envying, this bitter jealousy within you, and this strife in your heart, and all of this stuff inside of you that is contradictory to God, don't lie and act like you're good to go when you're not. And he goes in verse 15 and 16. Somebody read it. He says, this wisdom, this is, like I said, James is not one to waste words, and sometimes he points things out. This wisdom does not come from above. It does not come from God. It's earthly. It's sensual. Like I said, not one to waste words. It is devilish. If a person walks around and acts like they're on their way to heaven and is not, he goes, that anything that is logical there in your brain is not coming from God. Whatever's making you do that, that is devilish. That is sensual. It is earthly. It is bad. It is evil. He says, for where envyings and strife is, there is confusion and every evil work. All of them. They all come together. This is why it's funny whenever you talk to people and they say, well, you see, if you track back and they'll have some sort of, you can find the beginning of some sort of sin in this culture, and you can trace how they brought it. It was so-and-so in Europe, and then they brought it over to us, or this sin started here, and then it came over. No, sin is sin. It always happens everywhere, in every culture, all the time. Whenever sin runs, it runs. Don't act like sin came from one particular group of people. When capitalism ruled the earth, there was sin. When communism took over the East, there was sin. When socialism took over Europe, there was sin. As socialism is trying to take over America, there is sin. There is going to be sin under every group at every time for all of time. That is part of the problem, and that's why we need God, is that sin is just going to exist. And where the envying and the strife comes in, there will be confusion, there will be every evil work. Then verses 17 and 18. Somebody go ahead and read them. Okay. It says, the wisdom that is from above is first pure. First. Why is that important? Because the wisdom that is from above never works an ulterior motive. It never does something else. It is just pure. It is, and what does it mean to be pure? It's to, with all of these other things, it is to want what God wants, which is everybody to go to heaven. That's the beginning of wisdom. That's the beginning of understanding God, is that God is working to bring people to heaven. It's the most pure thing. And it's why, as Christians, we should be careful not to try to mix things too much. And I know we use all these different methods in order to win people. The Bible tells us to be all things to all men. And we use different ways of talking to people. I don't mean in any sinful way. I just mean we maybe with one guy I talk about one thing. With a different person I talk about a different thing, because they don't both care about the same thing. And I don't particularly care what we're talking about as long as they're going to go to heaven. So I'll talk with you about whatever you want to talk about, right? And so they have a way of understanding, oh, let me talk to this person in this way. Let me talk to this person in this way. Let me win this person with this. Let me win that person with that. But everybody should know that I'm trying to get them to go to heaven. And with that being the premise, then we can have a good time afterwards. But sometimes if you begin with the premise of anything else, then they think you have an ulterior motive. As one man once said, we used to walk around, we'd start conversations while soul winning, and we would walk up to people and say, oh, hey, how you doing? Where are you from? Hey, And then at the end, you'd sneak in, hey, let me give you an invitation out to my church. I talked to one man. He said, I don't do that. So I walk up to him, I say, hey, can I give you an invitation to my church? And as soon as they grab it, I ask them about everything else. He goes, because I don't want them to think that I just started the conversation to invite them to church. I'd rather them know that I invited them to church so that I can have a conversation with them. He said, because then there's no ulterior motives. He said, it must be first pure. It must be first right. And then, by extension, it is peaceable. And it is gentle. It is easy to be entreated, easy to talk to, easy to interact with a Christian. Why? Because they're full of mercy. And they're full of good fruits, without partiality, right? We talked about this last week. They don't prefer one person over another person because one person got fancy clothes and the other person doesn't. They don't care about that. It's without partiality, and it's without hypocrisy. They don't act one way with one group and a different way with another group. And when I mean a different way, I mean in a sinful way, right? They don't walk around and come into church and have a big grin on their face. Oh, how's it going? It's so lovely to see you today. And then they turn around and they walk out of the church and they say, oh, that lady at church. I can't believe she said that to me. I can't believe she wore that. I can't believe she looks like that. I can't believe she did her hair like that. Without hypocrisy. They don't do both. He says, and the fruit of the righteousness is sown in peace. Christians are always working for peace. The fruit of righteousness is sown in peace of them that make peace. Making peace is great. I love that. Why is it great? Because it doesn't say of them that try to make peace or of them who are peaceable. It says of them that make peace. How do you make peace? You have to be proactive in the piecing. Right? You have to be proactive. If you have an issue with somebody, you walk up to them and you shake their hand and say, I forgive you. And they go, for what? You say, doesn't matter. Let's move on. We don't need to have a problem anymore. And they go, I didn't even know we had a problem. You say, I know, but I did. So let's move on. And they go, okay, fine. And then you walk away and they go, that was weird. But you get it out. make things right with people. Making peace is being proactive towards peace. Those that make peace. The blessed are the peacemakers, not those that are peaceful or peaceable. Sometimes people confuse weakness with peacemaking. Just because you're willing to get beat up doesn't mean you're making peace. That means you're willing to get beat up. Willing to make peace is to end the beating. It's to go be proactive within the church and to say, hey, we don't need to have problems. Walking up to somebody you never talked to before and shaking their hand saying, hey, how's it going? Making peace is a work. It's something you do. The church should be one that makes peace. And sometimes the best peacemakers are people that are clueless. They're the people that just walk up to you and they just walk up to everybody and they talk to everybody and you go, I don't think that guy's tracking that everybody was angry. And he might be, or he might not be, but he makes peace. Because he just walks up and everybody has to play it cool because he's there. Because no one has a problem with him. Sometimes they're too dumb to have problems with people. And sometimes I think God's going to bless those people. Peacemakers are active. The fruit of righteousness is in peace with them that make peace. So let's make peace in our lives. God bless you. We got church on Thursday. We'll have a grand old time. Let's go ahead and live for God all week long. Reverend Wallace, if you could dismiss us in prayer.